Hey everyone, I'm Peter Stories, here to guide you today. If you use this video to drift off to sleep, please tap like, hit subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now, settle in, get cozy, and let yourself relax. Three in the morning. It's always 3 in the morning when I wake up hearing those sounds again. My new house is over 1,000 miles from Olympic National Park, but I still hear them. My wife says they're just nightmares. She wasn't there. She didn't see what I saw that October night. My name is Caleb Rutherford, and I'm telling this story because I need people to understand something. The wilderness isn't just dangerous because of bears or getting lost. There's something worse out there. Something that doesn't show up in any ranger manual or safety briefing. I worked as a forest ranger for 8 years before that autumn of 2021. Now I live in Arizona, where the desert stretches for miles in every direction and you can see anything coming from a long way off. No trees, no shadows that move when they shouldn't, no sounds that could be anything or anyone. I need to start with why the Iris Pemberton case mattered so much to me. 3 years before, in 2018, I'd lost someone. Marcus Chen, a 23-year-old hiker from Portland who'd gone missing in the Hoh River area. We searched for 2 weeks. Found his backpack, his camera, even his boots arranged neatly by a stream like he'd just decided to walk barefoot into the forest and disappear. The case was never solved. Never closed, technically, but after 6 months it went cold. Marcus's parents would call me sometimes, asking if there were any updates. The guilt ate at me for years. So when the call came in about Iris Pemberton on October 15th, 2021, I volunteered immediately, maybe too quickly. My supervisor, Janet Reeves, gave me that look, the one that said she knew I was still carrying Marcus Chen around with me like a stone in my chest. But she approved my request to lead the search. Iris was 19, a photography student at the University of Washington. She'd driven up alone to Olympic to take pictures for her senior project, something about capturing the transition between seasons in the temperate rainforest. Her roommate reported her missing when she didn't return to Seattle on Sunday night as planned. Her car was found at the Salt Duke Hot Springs trailhead locked, with her purse still inside but her camera equipment gone. The weather that week had been typical for October in the Pacific Northwest. Constant drizzle that soaked through everything, temperatures dropping into the 40s at night. The forest floor was a carpet of wet maple and alder leaves that muffled every sound and turned every footstep into a potential slip hazard. The canopy was so thick that even at noon, the light filtering down had a greenish, underwater quality that made everything look unfamiliar. I started the search at dawn on Tuesday, October 16th. Standard protocol, GPS coordinates logged, radio check-in every hour, emergency beacon activated. I had my full kit: compass, map, first aid supplies, emergency shelter, extra batteries, water purification tablets, signal flares. Everything I'd carried for 8 years without ever really needing it. I was confident, maybe overconfident. The Salt Duke Trail is well marked, but Iris had been looking for unique photographic opportunities. Based on her project proposal, which her professor had shared with us, she'd been interested in finding locations where the forest showed signs of both autumn death and new growth. Places where fallen logs became nurse trees for new seedlings. Spots where streams cut through stands of old-growth Douglas fir. The kind of locations that required leaving the main trail. The first few hours were routine. I found a partial boot print in the mud about 2 miles up the trail. Definitely her size and tread pattern based on the shoes her roommate described. There were broken branches at eye level along a deer path that suggested someone had pushed through recently. Normal signs of an inexperienced hiker exploring off-trail. But around 11 a.m. I found something that made me stop cold. Her camera bag, sitting upright against a fallen log like someone had carefully placed it there. Not dropped, not abandoned in panic. Placed. The expensive camera equipment was still inside. Lens caps on, memory cards intact, battery still charged. No photographer, especially not a broke college student, leaves thousands of dollars in equipment behind voluntarily. I called it in immediately. Base, this is Rutherford. Found the missing person's camera equipment at coordinates. I rattled off the GPS numbers. Equipment appears undamaged and deliberately placed. Requesting backup for expanded search. Janet's voice crackled back through static. Copy that, Caleb. Weather's supposed to get worse this afternoon. I can have Rodriguez and Martinez out there by 1400 hours. But I was already studying the area around the camera bag. There were footprints in the soft earth. Iris's boot treads, but also something else. Larger prints, definitely male, with a distinctive wear pattern on the left heel. And they weren't random. They circled the area where the camera had been placed like someone had been standing there for a while thinking. That's when I noticed the first thing that didn't belong. Carved into the bark of a nearby cedar tree, about 6 feet up, were 3 parallel lines. Fresh cuts, the sap still seeping. They looked like claw marks, but no bear makes marks that neat, that intentional. And they were too high for any animal that lived in these woods. I took photos, made notes, and started following the larger footprints. They led away from the camera site in a straight line, not following any game trail or natural path. Whoever made them knew exactly where they were going. The prints were deep and evenly spaced, someone heavy, carrying extra weight, moving with purpose. My radio crackled. Rutherford, check in. I pressed the transmit button. This is Rutherford, following tracks south-southeast of the equipment recovery site. Still no sign of the missing person. Static. Then, breaking up. Weather moving in. Return to. Base, repeat. You're breaking up. Nothing but white noise. I checked my GPS. Still showing a signal. Coordinates steady. But when I tried to use it to navigate back to my starting point, the arrow spun wildly before pointing in 3 different directions within 10 seconds. I tapped the screen, turned it off, and on again. Same problem. The prints I'd been following disappeared at a stream crossing. The water was running higher than usual due to the recent rains, and the rocky stream bed showed no tracks on either side. I spent 20 minutes searching both banks before I found where they picked up again, 50 yards downstream, heading deeper into the forest. But these prints were different. Cleaner. Too clean, like they'd been made deliberately to be followed. That's when I heard it for the first time. A voice thin and distant carried on the wind through the trees. Help me, please. I'm hurt. Female voice. Young. Scared. I keyed my radio immediately. Base, this is Rutherford. I can hear the missing person calling for help. Moving to investigate. Static. Base, do you copy? Nothing. The voice came again, from a different direction this time. Someone help me. I can't walk. I left the stream and pushed through a stand of sword ferns toward the sound. The undergrowth was thick here, the kind of old-growth forest where tourists get disoriented and lost within 100 yards of the trail. Fallen logs crisscrossed at shoulder height, forcing me to duck and weave. My uniform caught on broken branches. Water dripped constantly from the canopy above, running down my neck despite my rain gear. I'm here, I called out. I'm a park ranger. Keep talking so I can find you. Silence. I stopped, listening. The forest around me had gone quiet in a way that made my skin crawl. No bird sounds, no rustle of small animals in the underbrush. Even the constant patter of dripping water seemed muted. Then I saw her. Iris Pemberton was sitting with her back against a massive Douglas fir tree about 30 yards ahead of me. Her long brown hair was matted with leaves and dirt, her hiking clothes torn and muddy. She was staring straight at me, but she wasn't moving. Iris? I called out. Are you injured? She didn't respond. Didn't even blink. I approached carefully, my first aid training kicking in. Possible head injury, shock, hypothermia. All common in lost hikers who'd spent days in the woods. But as I got closer, something felt wrong. Her posture was too straight, too still. People in medical distress don't sit that perfectly upright. At 10 feet away, I could see her face clearly. Her eyes were open but glassy, unfocused. Her skin had a waxy pallor that had nothing to do with cold or fear. At 5 feet away, I could smell the decay. Iris Pemberton had been dead for days, but I had just heard her voice calling for help. I stumbled backward, my hand instinctively reaching for my radio. Base, this is Rutherford. I found the missing person. She's... She's deceased, My voice trailed off as I realized what I was looking at. Iris's body had been posed. Her hands were folded neatly in her lap, her head positioned to look directly at the path I'd taken to reach her. Someone had arranged her there, waiting for me to find her, waiting for me to follow the voice that couldn't have been hers. My radio erupted in static, then cleared for just a moment. A voice came through, distorted but recognizable. My own voice. "Base, this is Rutherford. I've found the missing person." Then static again. Someone was playing back my radio transmissions. I turned to run and found myself face to face with a wall of hanging moss and spider webs that definitely hadn't been there when I'd approached the tree. The path I'd taken to reach Iris was gone, replaced by impenetrable undergrowth that looked like it had been growing there for decades. That's when I realized I wasn't alone in the forest. I was being hunted. I forced myself to think like a ranger instead of a panicked civilian. Someone was playing games with me, using technology and knowledge of the terrain to create psychological effects. The voice I'd heard could have been a recording, played through speakers hidden in the trees. The path could have been deliberately obscured with cut branches and camouflage netting. The radio interference was probably from a signal jammer. But knowing the methods didn't make them less effective. I was lost, my equipment was unreliable, and somewhere in these woods was someone who knew exactly where I was at all times. I pulled out my compass. The needle spun lazily in circles. Useless. My GPS showed my location as the middle of the Pacific Ocean. My radio picked up nothing but static, and occasional fragments of my own voice played back at random intervals. The light was starting to fade, and the Pacific Northwest forest at dusk is no place to be caught unprepared. I had maybe 2 hours before full darkness, and whoever was out there had already demonstrated they could manipulate my equipment and my environment in ways I didn't understand. I needed to find shelter, regroup, and wait for backup. Janet would send a team when I missed my evening check-in. I just had to survive until then. I moved away from Iris's body, marking trees with my knife as I went to avoid walking in circles. The forest floor was treacherous with hidden roots and holes, made worse by the constant moisture that turned fallen leaves into a slippery carpet. Every step produced a soft, squelching sound that seemed to echo longer than it should. After 20 minutes of careful navigation, I found what looked like a defensible position. A small clearing surrounded by thick undergrowth with a fallen log that could serve as both shelter and cover. I gathered dry kindling and prepared a small fire. In the mountains, fire means warmth, light, and a signal for rescue teams. But as I reached for my lighter, I hesitated. Fire also means visibility to anyone watching from the darkness. I decided on compromise. A small fire, banked low and shielded by the fallen log. Just enough heat to prevent hypothermia, not enough light to be seen from a distance. As the flames caught and began to spread warmth into the damp air, I tried to piece together what I knew. Someone had killed Iris Pemberton probably days ago. The same person had been monitoring my radio communications and had equipment sophisticated enough to jam GPS signals and play back recorded audio. They knew I was searching for Iris, and they'd used her body to lure me into a predetermined location. The question was why. Random serial killer seemed unlikely. Too much planning, too much technological sophistication. Personal grudge against me specifically? I couldn't think of anyone with that kind of hatred and these kinds of resources. Someone with a grudge against the Park Service in general? That was more possible, but still didn't explain the elaborate setup. Then I remembered the footprints I'd been following. Large, heavy, evenly spaced, military cadence, and the way the tracks had simply disappeared and reappeared at the stream crossing. That took training and experience in counter-tracking techniques. I was dealing with someone with military or special operations background, someone who'd turned the forest into a hunting ground and was using me as prey. The fire had burned down to coals when I heard the first new sound since finding Iris. Footsteps, moving slowly through the underbrush. Deliberate, unhurried, coming from multiple directions. I drew my service weapon, a .40 caliber Glock that I'd carried for 8 years and fired exactly twice, both times at injured animals. My hands were steady, but my heart was hammering against my ribs. The footsteps stopped, I know you're out there, I called into the darkness. I'm a federal officer. Show yourself. Silence. Then, from somewhere to my left, Iris's voice again. Help me. Please. I'm hurt. From my right, a different voice, male, older. Ranger Rutherford? Is that you? Thank God I've been lost for hours. From directly behind me, my own voice, calling out exactly what I'd just said. I know you're out there. I'm a federal officer. Show yourself. Speakers, hidden throughout the forest, playing back recordings to disorient me and mask the real sounds of movement. But now that I knew what to listen for, I could hear them underneath the artificial voices. Soft footfalls, careful breathing, the whisper of fabric against leaves. Someone was circling my position. I killed the fire with a handful of dirt and rolled away from the log into the underbrush. The sudden darkness was disorienting, but it worked both ways. Whoever was hunting me had lost visual contact. I lay still, controlling my breathing, and listened. The recorded voices had stopped, leaving only the natural sounds of the forest. Water dripping, wind in the canopy, and something else. A soft mechanical hum, like an electric motor running at low speed. Night vision equipment, military grade, judging by the sound. My hunter could see me clearly while I was effectively blind. I had one advantage: 8 years of experience moving through this forest in all conditions. I knew which ground cover would support my weight silently, which trees had low branches that could trip an unwary pursuer. Where the streams and ravines created natural channels and barriers, I began to move, staying low, using the terrain for concealment. My plan was simple: break contact, find high ground, and signal for help using my emergency flares. Basic survival doctrine. But as I crawled through the wet ferns and moss, I realized my pursuer was hurting me. Every time I tried to move north toward the main trail system, I'd hear movement from that direction. When I turned east toward the river, footsteps would block that route too. I was being pushed south, deeper into the wilderness toward the most remote and inaccessible parts of the park. After an hour of this deadly game of hide-and-seek, I found myself at the edge of a deep ravine. The sound of rushing water echoed up from somewhere far below. Behind me, I could hear my pursuer moving closer, no longer bothering to be stealthy. I was trapped. That's when the voice spoke from directly behind me. Not from speakers this time. Real, human, close enough that I could feel breath on my neck. "Hello, Ranger Rutherford." I spun around, my weapon raised, but saw nothing. The voice had come from empty air. "You're probably wondering who I am." The voice continued, now from my left. "Why I'm doing this. Whether you're going to die tonight." I tracked toward the sound, but again found nothing. He was using the acoustics of the forest, throwing his voice, staying mobile. "My name is Vincent Harrow. Does that mean anything to you?" It didn't. I'd never heard the name before in my life. I spent 12 years in Army Special Forces, 2 tours in Afghanistan, 1 in Iraq. I know how to hunt, how to track, how to make people disappear without a trace. I came back to the States in 2019 with skills that don't translate well to civilian life. A branch cracked somewhere to my right. I aimed toward the sound but held my fire. Muzzle flash would give away my position and ruin my night vision for precious seconds. I found this place by accident 2 years ago. Olympic National Park. Millions of acres of wilderness where a man can practice his craft without interference. Do you know how many people go missing in national parks every year, Ranger Rutherford? Thousands. And most of them are never found. I was backing toward the ravine, running out of options. The drop behind me was at least 50 feet to the rocky stream below. Survivable maybe, but I'd be injured and helpless. "I've been watching you for 3 days," Harrow continued. "Ever since you volunteered to lead the search for Miss Pemberton. You have a hero complex, don't you? Still trying to make up for that hiker you lost 3 years ago. Marcus Chen, wasn't it?" My blood went cold. He knew about Marcus. He'd researched me, studied my history, my psychology. This wasn't random. I was specifically chosen. Iris was bait, he said. A pretty college girl alone in the woods, the kind of victim that would make you volunteer immediately. I kept her alive for 2 days, waiting for you to take the case. She was very brave at the end. Called out for her mother. Rage flooded through me, burning away the fear. You son of a bitch. There he is. Harrow's voice came from directly in front of me now, maybe 20 feet away. The anger, the righteous fury, that's what I wanted to see. You can't save everyone, Ranger Rutherford. You couldn't save Marcus Chen. You couldn't save Iris Pemberton. And you can't save yourself. I saw the muzzle flash before I heard the shot. The bullet passed so close to my head that I felt the shockwave. I dove to the left, rolling behind a fallen log as 2 more shots splintered bark inches from my face. I'm not trying to kill you quickly, Harrow called out. Where's the sport in that? I want you to run. I want you to hide. I want you to experience what it feels like to be prey. Another shot, this one aimed at the log I was hiding behind. High-powered rifle, probably with a scope and night vision. He could see me clearly while I was firing blind. I had 6 rounds in my service weapon and 2 spare magazines. Against a trained sniper with superior equipment and intimate knowledge of the terrain, that might as well be 6 harsh words. But I wasn't dead yet, and sometimes that's enough. I pulled out my emergency flares and popped one, throwing it as far as I could to the right. The brilliant red light illuminated a wide circle of forest, revealing nothing but trees and shadows. But it also temporarily blinded anyone using night vision equipment. In that brief window, I ran left, sprinting through the underbrush toward a cluster of large boulders I'd glimpsed in the flare light. Another shot cracked behind me, wide of the mark. Harrow was firing from memory, his night vision scrambled by the sudden illumination. I reached the rocks and pressed myself against the cold stone, gasping for breath. The flare was already starting to fade, and once it died completely, Harrow's night vision would readjust. That's when my radio crackled to life. Caleb? Caleb, do you copy? This is Janet. I nearly sobbed with relief. Janet, I copy. I need immediate backup at... I looked at my GPS, but it was still showing garbage coordinates. I'm approximately 5 miles south of the Saul Duke trailhead. Armed suspect, shots fired. Officer needs assistance. Caleb, we've been trying to reach you for hours. Your emergency beacon went active, then offline. What's your situation? I found Iris Pemberton. She's dead, murdered. The killer is still here. He's hunting me. Military training, night vision, high-powered rifle. I need SWAT. I need helicopter support. I need... The radio cut out. Not static this time, just dead silence. Then Harrow's voice came through my radio speaker. Hi, Janet. This is Caleb. False alarm on that backup request. Equipment malfunction. I'm fine. My own voice, perfectly reproduced. Janet's response. Copy that, Caleb. Glad you're okay. Continue search and report in at 0600. Will do. Rutherford out. Silence. Harrow had been monitoring and recording my radio communications from the beginning. He had hours of audio to work with, enough to create convincing false messages. As far as my backup knew, I was fine and didn't need help. No one was coming for me. The flare died out, plunging the forest back into absolute darkness. I heard Harrow moving again, circling my position. He was taking his time now, confident that I had no way to call for help. I had to change the game. Stop reacting and start thinking tactically. Harrow had superior equipment and training, but I had something he didn't. 8 years of intimate knowledge of this specific forest. I knew every trail, every stream, every landmark within a 50-mile radius. More importantly, I knew the places where his advantages would be neutralized. There was a network of lava tubes about 2 miles north of my current position. Natural caves formed by ancient volcanic activity, with multiple entrances and a maze of interconnected passages. Underground, his night vision would be useless. In the confined spaces, his rifle would be a liability rather than an asset. If I could reach the caves, I could turn this from a hunt into a fair fight. I started moving north, staying low, using every piece of cover available. Harrow's shots followed me, but they were getting less accurate. He was firing at sounds and movement, not clear targets. The forest canopy was too thick for him to get clean sight lines. "You're heading toward the lava tubes, aren't you?" His voice echoed through the trees. I studied the topographical maps, Ranger Rutherford. "I know this terrain as well as you do." "Maybe, but maps don't show you which fallen logs will hold your weight or which stream crossings are passable in different seasons. Maps don't tell you that the third entrance to the cave system is hidden behind a curtain of moss, or that the main passage floods during heavy rains." I reached the first tube entrance and paused, listening. No sounds of pursuit, but that didn't mean anything. Harrow could be anywhere, watching, waiting for me to make a mistake. The cave mouth was a black hole in the hillside, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. I'd explored these tubes during my first year as a ranger, mapping them for search and rescue purposes. They extended for nearly a mile underground, with multiple chambers and several exits. I clicked on my flashlight and immediately regretted it. The beam cut through the darkness like a beacon, advertising my position to anyone watching. But I needed light to navigate the caves safely. One wrong step could mean a broken ankle or a fall into an underground pool. I entered the main passage, my footsteps echoing off the stone walls. The air was cool and damp, smelling of minerals and bat guano. Water dripped constantly from the ceiling, and somewhere in the distance, I could hear the sound of an underground stream. Behind me, a voice called out, "I'm coming for you, Ranger Rutherford. These caves won't save you. They'll just make your death more interesting." But the voice sounded different now, less confident. Harrow was out of his element underground, and he knew it. I moved deeper into the cave system, following passages I remembered from years before. The tunnels branched and rejoined in a complex network that would be nearly impossible to navigate without prior knowledge. I was betting that Harrow's topographical maps didn't include detailed cave surveys. After 10 minutes of careful movement, I reached a large chamber where 3 passages converged. This was the heart of the cave system, with exits leading north, east, and west. I positioned myself where I could watch all 3 entrances and waited. The silence was absolute. No dripping water, no sound of wind through the cave mouths. Just my own breathing and the beating of my heart. Then I heard it. Footsteps echoing from the main entrance. Slow, careful, but definitely coming my way. Harrow had followed me into the caves. I turned off my flashlight and drew my weapon. In the complete darkness, we were on equal terms. No night vision would work here. We'd be fighting by sound and instinct. The footsteps stopped. Harrow had probably reached the first branch in the tunnel system and was trying to decide which way I'd gone. Without light, he'd have to guess. Minutes passed. The waiting was agony, straining to hear any sound that would give away his position. My finger rested on the trigger, ready to fire at the first sign of movement. A light appeared in the eastern passage. Bright white LED beam sweeping back and forth across the cave walls. Harrow was using a tactical flashlight, the kind that could temporarily blind an opponent at close range. I aimed carefully at where the light source would be and waited for him to enter the chamber. The beam swept across the space where I was hiding, passed by, then snapped back. He'd seen me. "There you are," Harrow's voice echoed off the stone walls. "End of the line, Ranger Rutherford." I fired 3 rapid shots at the light source. The beam spun wildly, then went out. In the muzzle flashes, I caught a glimpse of a tall figure diving for cover behind a rock formation. Return fire came immediately. The rifle shots were deafeningly loud in the confined space, and the muzzle flashes lit up the chamber like strobes. Rock chips exploded around me as bullets struck the stone walls. I rolled to new cover and fired twice more in the direction of his muzzle flashes. 5 rounds gone, 7 left. I had to make them count. "You can't hide in here forever," Harrow called out. "I've got all night and plenty of ammunition." But something in his voice had changed. He sounded wounded, maybe hit by one of my shots. And his breathing was labored, echoing strangely off the cave walls. I realized what was happening. The cave acoustics were working against him. Every sound he made was amplified and distorted, making it impossible for him to pinpoint my location while revealing his own position perfectly. I moved quietly to a different angle and waited. When he fired again, I was ready. His muzzle flash showed me exactly where he was hiding, and I put 2 rounds into that position. A cry of pain echoed through the chamber, followed by the sound of something metallic clattering on stone. His rifle. You got me. Harrow's voice was weak now, definitely injured. But this isn't over. You think I'm the only one? You think this ends with me? I approached carefully, my weapon trained on where I'd last seen him. It's over, Harrow. You're under arrest for the murder of Iris Pemberton. Silence. I risked turning on my flashlight. The beam revealed Harrow slumped against the cave wall, clutching his shoulder. Blood seeped between his fingers, but the wound didn't look fatal. His rifle lay several feet away, the scope shattered by one of my bullets. He looked up at me with eyes that held no remorse, only calculation. You have no idea what you've stumbled into, Ranger Rutherford. Iris was just the beginning. There are others like me, other hunting grounds. You can't stop what's coming. We'll see about that, I said, keeping my weapon trained on him while I retrieved his rifle. Right now, you're going to tell me everything. But Harrow just smiled, a cold expression that made my skin crawl. You still don't understand. I let you win. This was all part of the plan. Before I could ask what he meant, the cave system erupted in light and sound. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness from all 3 passages, and I heard voices shouting commands. Federal agents, drop your weapon. I lowered my gun immediately, recognizing the tactical response of a professional team. I'm Ranger Caleb Rutherford. The suspect is wounded and disarmed. But as the agents entered the chamber, I noticed something that made my blood freeze. They weren't looking at Harrow with the attention you'd give a dangerous suspect. They were looking at me. Vincent Harrow, FBI undercover, one of the agents announced. You're under arrest for the murder of Iris Pemberton and assault on a federal officer. The world tilted sideways. Harrow struggled to his feet with help from 2 agents, still clutching his wounded shoulder but now wearing a triumphant expression. Excellent work, Ranger Rutherford, he said. You played your part perfectly, chasing shadows through the forest, firing on a federal agent conducting a classified operation. The physical evidence will show that you killed Miss Pemberton in a psychotic break and then attacked me when I got too close to the truth. I stared at him in shock. That's impossible. You admitted to killing her. You hunted me through the forest. I have recordings of our entire conversation, Harrow interrupted. Carefully edited, of course. They'll show a disturbed ranger confessing to murder and threatening a federal investigator. The agents were cuffing me now, reading me my rights. I tried to explain, tried to tell them about the equipment failures, the voice recordings, the elaborate setup. But every word made me sound more delusional. As they led me out of the caves, Harrow leaned close and whispered, I told you there were others like me. What do you think happens to rangers who get too close to the truth? Marcus Chen figured it out too. That's why he had to disappear. The words hit me like a physical blow. Marcus hadn't gotten lost in the forest. He'd been murdered, just like Iris. And now they were framing me for crimes I'd tried to stop. How many? I asked. Harrow smiled. More than you think. Fewer than you fear. We're very selective about our hunting grounds. That was 3 years ago. I spent 18 months fighting the charges before my lawyer finally negotiated a plea deal. Manslaughter in the 2nd degree, sentence suspended pending psychiatric evaluation and treatment. The condition was that I could never work as a law enforcement officer again and had to relocate to a different state. I chose Arizona because it's the opposite of Washington in every way. No forests, no hidden places where predators can hunt without being seen. The desert is honest. Dangerous, but honest. My wife thinks I should let it go, move on with my life. She doesn't understand that some things can't be forgotten. Every time I close my eyes, I see Iris Pemberton's face posed against that tree. Every time the phone rings, I wonder if it's another ranger who's gotten too close to the truth. Because Harrow was right about one thing. There are others like him. I've spent the last 3 years researching missing person cases in national parks, looking for patterns, connections. What I've found would terrify you. The cases are too similar to be coincidence. Experienced hikers who vanish without trace. Equipment found in impossible locations. search teams that report equipment failures and communication problems, rangers who suffer mysterious accidents or psychological breaks shortly after investigating these disappearances. It's a network, a conspiracy of predators using America's wilderness areas as hunting preserves, protected by federal law enforcement resources and covered up by discrediting or eliminating anyone who gets close to exposing them. I tried to go to the media, to congressional investigators, to anyone who would listen. But a disgraced ex-ranger with a history of mental health issues isn't a credible witness, especially when the people I'm accusing have the resources to make evidence disappear and witnesses recant their statements. So I'm telling this story here, hoping that someone will believe me. Someone with the resources and authority to investigate properly, because the killing hasn't stopped. Every few months, another hiker goes missing, another ranger has a breakdown or an accident, another family is left wondering what happened to their loved one. If you're planning to visit Olympic National Park or any of the major wilderness areas in this country, please be careful. Don't hike alone. Stay on marked trails. Report any equipment failures or unusual encounters immediately. And if you're a ranger or law enforcement officer investigating missing person cases in national parks, watch your back. They're still out there, still hunting, and they've had 3 years to perfect their methods. I wake up at 3 in the morning because that's when the nightmares are strongest. That's when I can still hear Iris Pemberton's voice calling for help, even though I know she was already dead. That's when I remember Vincent Harrow's smile as they led me away in handcuffs. But mostly I wake up because I can still hear Marcus Chen calling my name from somewhere deep in the forest, calling for help that will never come. The desert sunrise is beautiful in Arizona, clean light, clear horizons, nowhere for shadows to hide. But even here, 1,000 miles from Olympic National Park, I can still hear the sound of footsteps following me through the trees. Some hunts never end, but I'm not giving up. I can't. Every time I think about walking away, I remember Iris Pemberton's parents at the trial. Her mother collapsed when the verdict was read. Manslaughter, not murder, because they couldn't prove premeditation. Her father just stared at me with empty eyes, the same look I'd seen from Marcus Chen's parents 3 years earlier. The look of people who will never have closure, never understand what really happened to their children. I've been building a database. Names, dates, locations, patterns. Working from my home computer in Phoenix, cross-referencing missing person reports with ranger incident files, weather data, equipment failure logs. The picture that's emerging is worse than I initially thought. It's not just Olympic National Park. Yellowstone has had 17 unexplained disappearances in the last 5 years, all involving experienced hikers with quality equipment. Great Smoky Mountains, 12 cases. Glacier National Park, 9. Yosemite, 23. The pattern is consistent across all sites. Initial search teams report multiple equipment failures. Rangers assigned to the cases either request transfers shortly afterward or suffer career-ending incidents. Physical evidence is found in locations that make no logical sense, like backpacks discovered on cliff faces that would require technical climbing equipment to reach. And the victims, they're not random. Young, attractive, physically fit. The kind of people who would provide challenging prey for sophisticated hunters. College students on solo photography trips. Experienced hikers attempting difficult trails alone. Marathon runners training in wilderness areas. I've identified at least 47 cases over the past decade that fit the pattern. 47 people who walked into America's national parks and were systematically hunted by predators with government protection. The most disturbing discovery came 6 months ago when I was researching disappearances in the Adirondack region of New York. A state park ranger named Diana Vasquez had gone missing during a search and rescue operation. Her body was found 2 weeks later in a location her team had already searched twice. The official cause of death was listed as accidental fall, but the crime scene photos showed something that made my hands shake. 3 parallel cuts in a nearby tree, exactly like the marks I'd found at Iris's camera site. Fresh cuts, sap still seeping. I tried to contact Diana's partner, Ranger Tom Morrison, but was told he'd taken early retirement due to stress-related health issues. When I finally tracked him down at his home in Albany, he agreed to meet me at a public cafe. Morrison was a wreck. Trembling hands, bloodshot eyes, the look of a man who hadn't slept properly in months. He kept glancing over his shoulder, checking the windows, studying every customer who entered the cafe. "You're Rutherford," he said when I sat down. It wasn't a question. "How did you know?" "Diana mentioned your case before it happened. Said there was a ranger in Washington who'd tried to expose them and got framed for murder. We didn't believe her at first." "What did she find?" Morrison leaned across the table, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Radio intercepts. Diana was a communications specialist before she became a ranger. She had equipment that could monitor encrypted frequencies. She started picking up chatter about package deliveries and hunting schedules in areas where people had gone missing." "Did she record any of it?" "Some. Not enough to prove anything in court, but enough to know she was right." Morrison pulled a flash drive from his pocket and slid it across the table. "Everything she collected is on here. Names, frequencies, partial transcripts. Maybe you can make sense of it." I pocketed the drive immediately. "Why are you giving this to me? Why not take it to the FBI yourself?" Morrison's laugh was bitter. "Because half the agents I'd report to are probably involved. Diana tried going through official channels. 3 days later, she was dead. What makes you think I'll have better luck?" "Because you're already dead, officially speaking. Your reputation is destroyed. Your credibility is shot. That makes you dangerous to them in a different way. They can't frame you again, it would be too obvious. And they can't kill you without raising questions about why a disgraced ex-ranger in Arizona suddenly became a threat." Morrison stood to leave, then paused. "There's something else on that drive. A list of names Diana compiled. Rangers and agents who died or disappeared after investigating these cases. The list goes back 20 years, Rutherford. This thing is bigger and older than either of us imagined." He walked away without another word, and I never saw him again. 2 weeks later, Tom Morrison was found dead in his apartment from an apparent drug overdose. The man who'd seemed terrified of his own shadow had supposedly injected himself with enough heroin to kill a horse, despite having no history of drug use. I spent months analyzing Diana's files. The radio intercepts were fragmentary but consistent. References to packages being delivered to specific coordinates within national parks, discussion of hunting seasons, and preserve maintenance. And most chilling of all, casual conversations about cleaning up after unsuccessful hunts. The names on Diana's list were equally disturbing. 43 law enforcement personnel who died under suspicious circumstances after investigating missing person cases in wilderness areas. Car accidents on straight roads in good weather. Suicides by people with no history of depression. Heart attacks in healthy individuals. Equipment failures during routine operations. All of them had one thing in common. They'd gotten too close to the truth about what was really happening in America's national parks. But the most shocking discovery was at the bottom of Diana's file directory. Audio recordings from the night she died. Her voice, frightened but determined, documenting her final investigation. "This is Ranger Diana Vasquez, October 23rd, 2:17 a.m. I'm approximately 3 miles northwest of the visitor center, following radio signals that match the encrypted frequencies I've been monitoring. The transmission originated from coordinates that place it in the middle of the restricted wilderness area. Static, then footsteps crunching through leaves. I can see lights ahead through the trees, multiple sources, too organized to be campers. I'm going to try to get closer for visual confirmation." Long pause, breathing heavily. "Oh my God, there are vehicles here, military-style trucks with government plates and people. Jesus Christ, they're in tactical gear. This is some kind of base camp." Sound of movement, voices in the distance. I can hear them talking. They're discussing coordinates, timing, something about a package delivery scheduled for dawn. I need to get photos, evidence. The recording cut to static, then resumed several minutes later. Diana's voice was different now. Terrified. Desperate. "They know I'm here. I don't know how, but they know. I can hear them searching, calling out coordinates. They have night vision, tracking equipment. I'm trying to reach my vehicle, but I think they've cut me off." Sound of running, branches breaking. If something happens to me, if this recording is found, people need to know. This isn't just about missing hikers. They're running some kind of training program. using real people as prey to train military personnel in hunting techniques. The national parks are their classroom, and American citizens are their lab rats. Gunshots in the distance. They're getting closer. I can hear dogs now. Tracking dogs. I'm going to try to hide this recorder where someone might find it. Tom, if you're listening to this, don't trust anyone in the federal system. Don't trust the FBI. Don't trust the Park Service Administration. This goes all the way to the top. More gunshots. Much closer. Tell my sister I love her. Tell her I tried to stop them. Tell her. The recording ended. Diana's body was found the next morning at the bottom of a ravine, officially ruled an accidental fall during a night training exercise. The recorder was discovered hidden in a hollow tree 50 yards from where she died. Tom Morrison had retrieved it before the official investigation team arrived. I've listened to that recording hundreds of times, analyzing every word, every background sound. Diana died trying to expose a network that uses America's wilderness areas as training grounds for human hunting. A network with resources and authority that reach into the highest levels of federal law enforcement. Since acquiring Diana's files, I've been more careful. I use encrypted communication, proxy servers, anonymous browsing. I've documented everything and stored copies in multiple secure locations. If something happens to me, the information will automatically be released to journalists, congressional investigators, and international human rights organizations. But I know that may not be enough. They've been operating for decades, covering up their activities, eliminating threats. They have resources I can't compete with and authority I can't challenge directly. That's why I'm telling this story now, in this format. Social media, podcast interviews, online testimonials. They can't control all of these platforms simultaneously. The more people who hear this story, the harder it becomes for them to suppress it. I'm not asking you to believe everything I've told you. I know how it sounds. Conspiracy theories, government cover-ups, secret networks of predators. It sounds like the delusions of a disturbed ex-ranger with PTSD. But I am asking you to consider the evidence. Look up the missing person statistics for national parks. Research the unusual number of equipment failures reported by search teams. Investigate the suspicious deaths of rangers and agents who got too close to certain cases. And if you're planning to visit any of America's wilderness areas, please be careful. Don't go alone. Stay on marked trails. Report any unusual encounters immediately. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Most importantly, if you're in law enforcement and you encounter cases that match the patterns I've described, protect yourself. Document everything. Make copies. Store evidence in multiple locations. Don't trust your chain of command until you're absolutely certain they're not involved. The people I'm talking about are still out there, still hunting, still training new predators to see human beings as prey. Every missing person case in a national park could be their work. Every equipment failure during a search could be their interference. I moved to Arizona to escape the forests, but I can't escape the knowledge of what's happening in them. Every night when I close my eyes, I see Iris Pemberton's face. Every morning when I wake up, I think about Diana Vasquez and Tom Morrison and all the others who died trying to expose the truth. This is my testimony. This is my warning. This is my attempt to honor the memory of everyone who's been hunted in America's wilderness and everyone who's died trying to stop it. The desert sun is rising over Phoenix as I finish writing this. Clean light, clear horizons, nowhere for shadows to hide. But I know that somewhere in the forests of Washington and Montana and Tennessee, the hunters are preparing for another season, another group of prey, another set of training exercises using human lives. I can't stop them alone. But maybe, if enough people learn the truth, we can stop them together. My name is Caleb Rutherford. I was a forest ranger for 8 years. I tried to save people and instead I became one of their victims. But I'm still alive, and as long as I'm breathing, I'll keep fighting to expose what they've done. The hunt may never end, but neither will the truth. Remember Iris Pemberton. Remember Diana Vasquez. Remember Marcus Chen and Tom Morrison and all the others whose names we'll never know. And remember that sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones wearing badges. 3 in the morning. It's always 3 in the morning when I wake up hearing those sounds again. My new house is over 1,000 miles from Olympic National Park, but I still hear them. My wife says they're just nightmares. She wasn't there. She didn't see what I saw that October night. My name is Marcus Caldwell, and I need to tell someone this story. It's been 4 years since I left Washington State and moved here to Vermont. 4 years since I turned in my ranger badge and swore I'd never set foot in a forest alone again. The mountains here are different, gentler somehow. The maples and birches don't loom like those ancient Douglas firs. The silence doesn't feel hungry. I was 27 when it happened. Been working as a forest ranger at Olympic National Park for 18 months. Still green, still eager to prove myself. That was my first mistake, thinking I knew what I was doing just because I'd memorized every protocol in the manual. October 15th, 2019. The call came in at 6:47 a.m. Kaya Brennan, 22 years old, marine biology student from Portland State. She'd been conducting research on old-growth forest ecosystems in the Hoh River area for her graduate thesis. Her professor expected her back 2 days ago. Her rental car was found at the Hoh River trailhead, keys still in the ignition, driver's door hanging open like she'd stepped out for just a minute. I remember everything about that morning. The way the mist clung to the valley floor, thick as cotton batting. How the Douglas firs disappeared into gray nothing about 50 feet up their trunks. The smell of decomposing salmon from the river, October spawning season. And that sound, even then before everything went wrong, there was something off about the forest sounds. Too quiet. No bird calls, no squirrel chatter. Just the distant whisper of water over stones. My supervisor, Ranger Davidson, assigned me to lead the initial search. Standard grid pattern, he said, marking areas on the topographical map spread across his desk. She's probably just got turned around, maybe twisted an ankle. These academic types always think they know the woods better than they do. I should have asked for backup right then. Should have insisted on a full team. But I was young, cocky, desperate to prove I could handle something important on my own. Davidson had been questioning my readiness for solo assignments, and here was my chance to show him wrong. The Hoh River area is some of the most pristine wilderness left in the lower 48. Ancient rainforest, trees older than Christ, moss hanging like funeral shrouds. During tourist season, the main trails stay busy, but by mid-October, you're lucky to see another human being all day. The deeper you go, the more the forest closes in around you. Light barely penetrates the canopy, even at noon. By 5 p.m. in October, it might as well be midnight. I started at Kaya's car looking for clues. Her backpack was missing, along with her research equipment. Good signs. Meant she'd planned to be out there, wasn't just grabbed from the parking area. I found fresh boot prints leading toward the Hall of Mosses trail, size 6 or 7, consistent with a young woman. The prints were clear in the mud near the trailhead, but as I followed them deeper into the forest, they became harder to track. That should have been my second warning. The ground was soft from recent rains, perfect for holding tracks. But Kaya's footprints seemed to fade. Not gradually, like you'd expect as the terrain changed, but abruptly, like she'd just vanished into thin air. I followed the trail for 3 miles, calling her name every few minutes. Kaya Brennan, can you hear me? My voice echoed strangely in the dense forest, seeming to come back from directions that didn't make sense. Around noon, I found something that made my pulse quicken. A piece of blue fabric caught on a vine about 4 feet off the ground. The color matched the description of the jacket she'd been wearing. But here's what bothered me. The fabric wasn't just caught, it was tied. Deliberately knotted around the vine like a trail marker. No way that happened by accident during a fall or struggle. Someone had put it there intentionally. I radioed back to headquarters. Base, this is Caldwell. I've got what looks like a deliberate trail marker at coordinates. I checked my GPS. The display flickered, showing error messages. I tried again. Same thing. Base, GPS is acting up. I'm approximately 3 miles southeast of the main trailhead near the river bend. Static crackled back at me. Say, again, Marcus, breaking, up. I tried adjusting the radio. checking the battery, switching channels. Nothing but static and occasional fragments of voices that sounded too distant to be from our base station. Probably interference from the dense canopy, I told myself. Happened sometimes in heavy forest. Following the fabric marker, I veered off the main trail onto what looked like an old deer path. The vegetation grew thicker, moss carpeting everything in an unnatural silence. My footsteps seemed muffled, like the forest was absorbing sound itself. That's when I started noticing the trees. They were marked. Not naturally scarred by wind or animals, but deliberately cut. Small notches carved into bark at eye level, forming arrows pointing deeper into the woods. Fresh cuts, sap still weeping from the wounds. Someone had been here recently, creating a trail system that didn't appear on any of my maps. The smart thing would have been to turn back, wait for reinforcements, approach this systematically. But I could feel time slipping away. If Kaya was injured, exposure could kill her before help arrived. October nights in the Olympics drop into the 30s. I had maybe 4 hours of decent light left. I followed the marked trees deeper into territory I'd never explored, even in training. The forest here felt different, older, more primitive. Moss hung in curtains from branches, creating a maze of green shadows. The air smelled of decay and something else, something organic and wrong that I couldn't identify. That's when I heard the first scream. High-pitched, definitely female, coming from somewhere ahead and to my left. Panic shot through my system like electricity. I crashed through the undergrowth toward the sound, thorns tearing at my uniform, moss slapping wetly against my face. "Kaya, I'm coming. Keep making noise." I ran for maybe 200 yards before stopping to listen. Nothing. No response to my calls. No more screaming. Just that oppressive forest silence and the sound of my own ragged breathing. I tried the radio again. Dead static. But there, about 50 yards ahead, I could see something that didn't belong. A splash of bright yellow against the dark forest floor. I approached carefully, hand moving instinctively to the bear spray on my belt. It was a tent. Modern backpacking gear. Expensive looking. The kind serious researchers used. It had to be Kaya's campsite. But something was wrong with the setup. The tent was perfectly erected, guy lines taut, rainfly properly positioned. Too perfect. Like someone with military precision had set it up. "Kaya?" I called softly, approaching the tent entrance. No response. I unzipped the fly and peered inside. Empty. But clearly lived in. Sleeping bag neatly arranged, personal items organized with almost obsessive care, research notebook stacked in exact alignment, camp stove positioned at perfect right angles to the tent wall. This wasn't how a scared, lost student would organize a campsite. This was how someone trained in field discipline would do it. I was examining the notebooks when I heard it. The distinctive crack of a branch breaking under weight. Not the random snap of deadfall, but the deliberate sound of something heavy moving through the forest. Something trying to be quiet and not quite succeeding. "Kaya? Is that you?" I stepped out of the tent, scanning the tree line. Nothing moved, but I had the sudden, overwhelming sensation of being watched. The hair on my neck stood up, and my mouth went dry with primitive fear. That's when I noticed the silence wasn't natural. It was enforced. The forest had gone completely quiet because something was hunting in it. Something that made every other living thing hold its breath and wait. I tried the radio one more time. "Base, this is Caldwell. I've located the missing person's campsite and..." Jesus Christ. The scream came from directly behind me. I spun around, nearly falling over my own feet, to see a figure stumbling through the trees about 30 yards away. Female, the right size and build to be Kaya Brennan. But something was wrong with how she moved. Jerky, unnatural, like a marionette controlled by drunk puppeteer. "Help me," she called, her voice carrying that flat, emotionless quality you hear in shock victims. "Please help me. He's coming back." I ran toward her, crashing through ferns and fallen logs. "Kaya, it's okay, I'm a park ranger. You're safe now." But as I got closer, I could see she wasn't safe. Not even close. Her clothes were torn, her face streaked with dirt and what looked like dried blood. But it was her eyes that stopped me cold, wide, staring, with the glassy look of someone who'd seen things that broke something fundamental inside them. "He said you'd come," she whispered when I reached her. "He said you'd follow the trail. He's been waiting." "Who? Who's been waiting?" I grabbed her shoulders gently, trying to establish eye contact. "Kaya, I'm Ranger Caldwell. I'm here to get you out." She laughed then, a sound like breaking glass. "You don't understand. There is no out, not anymore. He knows these woods better than God knows his own thoughts. He's been watching us since you found the first marker." A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the October air. "What marker? The fabric on the vine?" "He put that there this morning, after he heard the radio chatter about search teams. He wanted you to find it, wanted you to follow his trail." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "You're not here to rescue me, I'm the bait. You're the real prize." The forest around us seemed to shift, shadows moving where no wind could move them. I reached for my radio, fingers fumbling with the controls. Still nothing but static, but now I could swear I heard something else underneath the white noise, breathing that wasn't my own. "We need to move," I said, taking Kaya's arm. "Can you walk? How badly are you hurt?" "Hurt?" She looked at me like I'd asked if water was wet. "He doesn't hurt his toys, not until the end. He likes them functional, able to run. Makes the hunt more interesting." Every alarm bell in my head was screaming now. This wasn't a rescue mission anymore, this was a trap and we were both caught in it. I pulled out my GPS unit, praying it would work long enough to get a bearing back to the main trail. The screen lit up, showed our position for exactly 3 seconds, then went dead. The battery indicator had shown full charge that morning. "The electronics don't work in his territory," Kaya said matter-of-factly. "Something about the way he's modified the area. Military training, he says. Knows how to create dead zones." "How long have you been out here?" I asked, pulling her toward what I hoped was the direction of the main trail. 3 days, or maybe 4. Time gets strange when you're not sleeping. He doesn't let you sleep much. Keeps you moving, keeps you afraid. Fear makes the adrenaline flow, makes the meat taste better." I stopped walking. "What did you say?" She turned to look at me with those broken glass eyes. "You still don't understand, do you? He doesn't just hunt for sport, he hunts for food. And rangers? Well, rangers are a delicacy. All that muscle from hiking, all those healthy outdoor meals. He's been planning this for months." A branch snapped somewhere behind us. Close. Too close. I spun around, bear spray in my hand, but saw nothing except the endless maze of trees and moss. But I could feel eyes on us now, watching from multiple directions. We weren't alone in these woods, and whatever was out there had no intention of letting us leave. "Run," I whispered to Kaya. "We run now." But when I turned back to her, she was smiling. The first expression I'd seen on her face that looked remotely human. "Oh, Marcus," she said, and her voice was different now, clearer, more focused. "You still think this is about escape?" The world tilted sideways as understanding hit me. The perfect campsite, the deliberate trail markers, the way she'd appeared at exactly the right moment in exactly the right place. Kaya Brennan hadn't been missing for 3 days. She'd been hunting with him. "You're not," I started to say, but she was already moving, faster than anyone who'd been lost and traumatized should be able to move. She had something in her hand, a knife, long and sharp and stained with what I desperately hoped wasn't blood. I ran, crashed through the undergrowth like a wounded animal, branches tearing at my face, roots trying to trip me with every step. Behind me I could hear them coming, not just Kaya, but others. Multiple sets of footsteps moving through the forest with the coordinated precision of a military unit. My training said to follow established trails, maintain communication, never panic. My training was useless. These people knew every game trail, every fallen log, every possible route through this wilderness. They'd been planning this hunt for God knows how long, and I'd walked right into it like a lamb to slaughter. I tried to remember the way back to the main trail, but every direction looked the same in the gathering dusk. The trees seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them, paths appearing and disappearing like some fairy tale nightmare. My flashlight flickered weakly. The batteries that had been fully charged that morning were already dying. That's when I heard the voice calling through the trees. Male, calm, conversational. Like he was discussing the weather with a neighbor over a fence. Marcus. Marcus Caldwell, right? 18 months on the job, living in that little apartment on 5th Street. You don't need to run, son. This doesn't have to be difficult. I kept moving, trying to put distance between myself and that voice, but it seemed to come from everywhere at once. The acoustics of the forest were playing tricks, or maybe he really was that good at moving unseen through the wilderness. You're probably wondering about Kaya. The voice continued, sounding closer now. She was a quick learner, adapted to our lifestyle faster than most. Some people are just natural predators, they just need the right circumstances to discover it. I stumbled over a fallen log and went down hard, scraping my palms raw on the moss-covered bark. When I looked up, there was a figure standing about 20 yards away. Male, middle-aged, wearing military surplus gear that had seen real use. He looked completely at home in the wilderness, like he'd grown from the forest floor itself. "There we go," he said, and his voice was warm, almost fatherly. "No need to run anymore, Marcus. You're tired, I can see that. Been a long day. Why don't we sit and talk for a bit?" I scrambled to my feet, bear spray in my hand. "Stay back. I'm a federal officer." He laughed, and the sound was genuinely amused. "Son, you're about as federal as a Boy Scout selling cookies. You're a park ranger with 18 months' experience who got in over his head. Nothing wrong with that. Happens to the best of us. What do you want?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Same thing I've always wanted. Good hunting, good eating, and the satisfaction of testing myself against worthy prey." He took a step closer, and I could see details now that made my blood freeze. His clothes were stained with old blood. His teeth, when he smiled, were filed to points. And his eyes? His eyes had the flat, empty look of something that had killed so many times it no longer remembered what remorse felt like. "You're insane," I whispered. "Insane?" He considered this seriously. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just more honest about human nature than most people. We're apex predators, Marcus. Always have been. All this civilization, all these rules and regulations, they're just pretty lies we tell ourselves to forget what we really are." Movement in my peripheral vision. Kaya was circling around to my left, moving with the quiet precision of someone who'd learned to hunt. How many others were out there? How many missing persons had he recruited over the years? "The Park Service will miss me," I said, trying to buy time. "When I don't check in—" "Oh, you will check in," he said pleasantly. "Or rather, someone using your radio will. Kaya's gotten quite good at mimicking voices. Amazing what you can learn when you're properly motivated." My radio crackled to life suddenly, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. Through the static came my own voice. "Base, this is Caldwell. No sign of the missing person yet. Extending search until tomorrow morning. We'll camp overnight and resume at first light." The transmission ended, and he smiled that horrible smile again. "See? Your supervisor will go home to his family thinking you're doing your job. No one will come looking until it's far too late." That's when I realized the true horror of the situation. This wasn't random. They'd been monitoring park communications, learning our protocols, studying our patterns. How many rangers had disappeared over the years in remote areas, their vanishing explained away as accidents or voluntary departures? "How long?" I asked. "How long have you been doing this?" "Here in the Olympics? About 3 years. But I've been hunting in various national parks for over a decade. Amazing how much wilderness we have in this country. Amazing how easy it is for people to just disappear." The implications hit me like a physical blow. All those missing person cases that ended with no resolution. All the hikers and campers and researchers who walked into the wilderness and never walked out. How many of them had faced this same nightmare? "The other rangers who've gone missing," I started to say. "Some of them," he confirmed. "The ones who showed promise, Who had the right instincts? The others? He shrugged. Well, not everyone is cut out for our lifestyle. But you might be, Marcus. You found the trail, followed the markers, made it this far. That shows real potential. I'll never, I began, but he cut me off with a gesture. Never say never, son. You'd be amazed what people will do to survive, what they'll become when the alternative is death. He glanced up at the darkening sky. Speaking of which, we should get moving. The really good hunting happens at night. I had one chance. The bear spray in my hand had a range of about 20 feet. If I could catch him by surprise, create enough chaos to escape. I raised the canister, aimed for his face, and pressed the trigger. Nothing happened. The mechanism clicked impotently, but no spray emerged. He watched my futile efforts with the patient expression of a teacher watching a slow student work through a difficult problem. Kaya removed the safety pin this morning while you were examining her campsite, he explained. She's very thorough. Has to be, in our line of work. The despair that washed over me was absolute. No radio, no GPS, no weapons, no backup coming. Just me and whatever survival instincts I could muster against predators who'd been perfecting their craft for years. There is another option, he said, as if reading my thoughts. Join us. Learn what we have to teach. Embrace what you really are underneath all that civilization. I'm not a killer, I said. Not yet, he agreed. But give it time. Give it necessity. You'll be surprised what you're capable of when hunger starts talking louder than conscience. That's when I heard it. The distant sound of a helicopter. Faint, but getting closer. Search and rescue, maybe, or just routine patrol. But it was something, some hope in the darkness that was closing around me. He heard it too, and for the first time, his expression showed concern. Kaya, he called softly. Plan B. She emerged from the shadows like a ghost, still carrying that blood-stained knife. How many? She asked. Doesn't matter. We leave now, regroup at the secondary site. Marcus. He turned back to me. This has been educational, but we'll have to cut it short. Perhaps another time. You're not going to kill me? I asked, hardly daring to believe it. His smile was answer enough. Death is quick. What we're going to do is so much more interesting. Kaya moved faster than seemed humanly possible. I felt the prick of the knife at my throat, then a sharp pain as something pierced my neck. Not deep enough to kill, but something was being injected. Some kind of drug that made my legs go weak and my vision blur. Mild sedative, he explained as I collapsed to my knees. Won't last long, but long enough for us to relocate. When you wake up, you'll be somewhere much more private. Somewhere we can take our time getting to know each other. The helicopter was getting closer, but my limbs felt like they were made of lead. I tried to call out, but my voice came out as barely a whisper. The forest spun around me like a malevolent carousel, and the last thing I saw before losing consciousness was Kaya's face hovering over mine, wearing an expression of almost maternal concern. Don't worry, she whispered. The first few days are the hardest. After that, you start to understand. You start to see the truth about what we really are. I woke up in absolute darkness. Not the gray darkness of a cloudy night, but the complete absence of light that comes from being underground. The air smelled of earth and decay, and something else. Something that reminded me of a butcher shop. I was lying on a dirt floor, my hands zip-tied behind my back. When I tried to sit up, pain shot through my skull like a lightning bolt. The sedative was wearing off, but it left behind a nausea that made the world tilt sickeningly every time I moved. You're awake, came a voice from somewhere in the darkness. Not the man from the forest. This was different, younger. Good. He was starting to worry about the dosage. Where am I? I asked, my voice coming out as a croak. Underground, the voice replied unhelpfully. He's got places like this all over the park. Caves, old mine shafts, holes he's dug himself. Some natural, some improved with military engineering. You'd be amazed what someone with the right training can accomplish in 3 years. My eyes were starting to adjust and I could make out shapes in the darkness. We were in some kind of chamber, maybe 8 feet by 10 feet, with rough stone walls. Natural cave formation probably, but modified. I could see tool marks in the rock, places where the space had been deliberately enlarged. "Who are you?" I asked. "Name's Trevor. I was a backpacker from Colorado. Got lost about 6 months ago." There was something wrong with his voice, too flat, too accepting, like he was discussing the weather instead of his own captivity. 6 months? Jesus, why haven't you escaped? He laughed, and the sound was broken glass grinding against broken glass. Escape to what? Back to my job selling insurance? Back to my apartment and my student loans and my ex-girlfriend who cheated on me with my best friend? This is better, Marcus. This is real. I tried to process what he was saying, but my mind kept sliding away from the implications. You're helping them. Eventually, everyone helps them. It's amazing what hunger will make you do. What isolation will make you accept. He's very patient, you know. Very good at breaking people down piece by piece until they're grateful for any scrap of human contact. Even from him, a light appeared at what must have been the entrance to the cave. A flashlight beam cutting through the darkness like a sword. I could hear footsteps, multiple people moving with careful precision. "Ah," said Trevor. "Dinner time." The man from the forest appeared in the light, followed by Kaya and 2 others I hadn't seen before. More converts, I realized. More people who'd been broken down and rebuilt in his image. "Marcus," he said warmly, like we were old friends meeting for drinks. "How are you feeling? I hope Trevor has been good company." "What do you want?" I asked, though I was starting to suspect I already knew. "The same thing I've always wanted, to help you discover your true nature, to strip away all the comfortable lies civilization has told you about yourself and show you what you really are underneath." He knelt down beside me, close enough that I could smell the decay on his clothes, see the madness glittering in his eyes. "Do you know what the difference is between humans and animals, Marcus? Animals kill for survival, for territory, for mating rights. Simple, honest reasons. Humans kill for pleasure, for the sheer joy of watching life leave another creature's eyes. We're the only species that tortures for entertainment." "You're wrong," I said, though my voice lacked conviction. "Am I? Then explain war. Explain serial killers. Explain why humans are the only animals that systematically destroy their own environment for profit." He stood up, pacing the small chamber like a professor delivering a lecture. "We're not the good guys, Marcus. We never were. We're parasites, with delusions of grandeur." One of the others, a woman with hollow eyes and scars on her arms, stepped forward, carrying something wrapped in cloth. She unwrapped it carefully, revealing what looked like strips of cooked meat. "Hungry?" the man asked conversationally. "I imagine you haven't eaten since this morning." My stomach clenched with hunger, but I shook my head. "I'm not eating anything you give me." "No?" He seemed genuinely disappointed. "That's a pity. This is quite good. Fresh venison from a deer we took yesterday. Well, mostly venison." The way he said mostly made my skin crawl. I looked at Trevor, who was accepting a portion of the meat with every appearance of gratitude. "It gets easier," Trevor said between bites. "The first time is the hardest. After that, you start to see it differently. Meat is meat, right? Protein is protein. Survival is survival." I closed my eyes, trying to block out the implications of what they were saying. But closing my eyes made it worse because then I could only hear the sounds of chewing, the satisfied murmurs of people enjoying their meal. "The helicopter yesterday," the man continued, settling down across from me like we were sharing a campfire. "Search and rescue looking for you. They found your radio, dropped where Kaya left it. Standard search patterns, grid formations, the whole textbook approach." He paused to chew thoughtfully. "They'll search for maybe a week, then scale back operations. After 2 weeks, they'll call it off officially, though they might send out occasional patrols for a few months. After 6 months, you'll be just another missing person statistic. Another ranger who got in over his head and paid the price." "My family will keep looking," I said. "Will they? Your parents are getting older, Marcus. Your father's heart condition, your mother's arthritis. How long before the stress of searching becomes too much for them?" How long before they decide they need to move on with their lives? The casual way he discussed my family's suffering made rage bubble up in my chest. How do you know about my parents? Research, he said simply. I told you I've been planning this for months. I know about your college girlfriend who moved to Seattle. I know about your debt from ranger training. I know about the performance review that questioned your readiness for solo assignments. Each detail hit like a physical blow. He'd been watching me, studying me, learning everything about my life while I went about my daily routine completely unaware that I was being hunted. The question now, he continued, is what kind of predator you'll become. Some people like Trevor here adapt to a support role. Others like Kaya discover they have a real talent for the hunt itself. And a few, his eyes glittered in the flashlight beam. A few discover they're natural leaders. I'll never be like you, I said. Never is a long time, Marcus, and we have plenty of time down here. Months, if necessary. Amazing what isolation and hunger can accomplish. He stood up, brushing crumbs from his hands. Think about what I've said. Think about what you really are underneath all those pretty lies. When you're ready to embrace the truth, just let Trevor know. Until then. He gestured to the others, and they began filing out of the chamber. Wait, I called after him. You can't just leave me here. He paused at the entrance, silhouetted against his flashlight beam. I'm not leaving you, Marcus. I'm giving you time to think. Time to get really, truly hungry. Time to understand that there are only two kinds of people in this world, predators and prey. And prey doesn't survive very long in the wilderness. The light disappeared, and I was alone in the darkness with Trevor and the sound of my own ragged breathing. Time became meaningless in that cave. Without light, without any way to measure the passage of hours, my internal clock went haywire. I slept fitfully, woke to darkness, dozed, and woke again. Trevor talked sometimes, rambling monologues about his old life, his transformation, the freedom he'd found in embracing his true nature. The hunger started as a mild discomfort, then grew into a constant gnawing pain. My stomach cramped and twisted, demanding food that I refused to accept from my captors. But as the hours passed, days maybe, the hunger became something more than physical discomfort. It became a living thing, a voice in my head that grew louder and more insistent with each passing moment. When they brought food, I turned my face away. When they offered water, I refused that too, though my throat felt like sandpaper and my lips cracked and bled. I was going to die before I gave them the satisfaction of breaking me. But dying is harder than you think when you're young and healthy. The body fights, clinging to life with desperate tenacity even when the mind has given up. I grew weak, delirious, but I didn't die. I just suffered hour after hour, day after day, while the hunger ate me from the inside out. It was during one of my delirium episodes that I finally understood what he'd been trying to tell me. I was dreaming, or maybe hallucinating, about hunting. Not the kind of hunting I'd grown up with where you tracked deer through the woods for meat to feed your family. This was different. This was stalking humans through dark forests, feeling their terror, savoring their desperation. And in the dream, I enjoyed it. I woke up with the taste of blood in my mouth. I'd bitten my tongue during the hallucination, and the horrifying realization that part of me, some dark corner of my psyche that I'd never acknowledged, had found the dream satisfying. You're starting to understand, Trevor said from somewhere in the darkness. I can tell. It's in your voice when you sleep. You're dreaming the dreams now. I'm sick, I whispered. Starving. That's all. Maybe. Or maybe you're finally seeing past the lies you've been telling yourself your whole life. Maybe you're finally ready to admit what you really are. The next time they brought food, I stared at it for a long time before turning away. But the refusal felt different now, less like moral certainty and more like stubborn pride. The meat smelled good. My body needed protein, needed calories, needed anything that would stop the grinding agony in my stomach. Just a bite, Kaya said softly. Just enough to keep your strength up. No one will know but us. I closed my eyes and tried to remember who I used to be. Marcus Caldwell, park ranger. Someone who protected the wilderness and the people who visited it. Someone who believed in law and order and the fundamental goodness of human nature. But that person felt like a stranger now. That person had never been truly hungry, never been broken down to his component parts and rebuilt from scratch. That person had lived in a comfortable world of rules and regulations and steady paychecks, never understanding that civilization was just a thin veneer over something much older and more primitive. "I know what you're thinking," the man said, appearing in the entrance to the chamber. "You're thinking about your old life, your old beliefs. But that person is gone, Marcus. He died in this cave. What's left is something new, something more honest." "I won't become like you," I said, but even I could hear the uncertainty in my voice. "You already have," he replied. "You just haven't admitted it yet." He was right, and we both knew it. Something fundamental had broken inside me during those endless hours of darkness and hunger. Some essential piece of my humanity had been filed away, leaving behind something harder and more desperate. When they brought the next meal I ate, it tasted like survival, like the difference between life and death, like the most honest thing I'd ever put in my mouth. And while I chewed, while I swallowed, while I felt strength returning to my body, I tried not to think about what it might be. But I knew. Deep down, in the part of myself that was still capable of horror, I knew. And I ate it anyway. That was 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks since I stopped being a park ranger and became something else. Something that could live in the darkness, something that could hunt when necessary, something that understood the difference between the predators and the prey. The helicopter came back twice more, searching for any sign of Ranger Marcus Caldwell. They found nothing, of course. How could they? Marcus Caldwell was gone, replaced by something that knew how to move through the forest without leaving tracks, how to watch without being seen, how to hunt without being hunted. On the 19th day, he offered me a choice. I could stay in the cave system learning the deeper mysteries of what he called honest living, or I could return to the surface, to what remained of my old life, carrying with me the knowledge of what I'd become. "Most people choose to stay," he said. "The surface." 3 in the morning. It's always 3 in the morning when I wake up hearing those sounds again. My new house is over 1,000 miles from Olympic National Park, but still, I still hear them. My wife says they're just nightmares. She wasn't there. She didn't see what I saw that October night. My name is Damian Cross, and I need someone to know what really happened out there. It's been almost 5 years since I left Washington State and moved here to Arizona. The desert heat, the open sky, the complete absence of towering trees. I chose this place specifically because it's the opposite of everything I left behind. But even here, surrounded by cacti and red rock, I can still smell that wet Olympic Peninsula forest. I can still hear the sound of branches snapping under someone's weight. Someone who wasn't supposed to be there. I was 29 when it happened, and I'd been working as a forest ranger for only 18 months. Before Olympic, I'd worked at a smaller state park in eastern Washington, mostly dealing with weekend campers and the occasional lost hiker. When the transfer came through to Olympic National Park, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. One of the most pristine wilderness areas in the country, nearly 1 million acres of temperate rainforest, rugged coastline, and mountain peaks. It was everything I'd dreamed of when I got into this profession. Maybe that was my first mistake, thinking I was ready for something that big. The Olympic Peninsula is unlike anywhere else in the lower 48. The western side gets over 12 feet of rain a year, creating these ancient temperate rainforests where Sitka spruce and western hemlock grow so thick that even in the middle of the day, it feels like twilight under the canopy. Moss hangs from everything like green curtains, and the forest floor is a carpet of ferns and fallen logs that have been decomposing for centuries. It's beautiful, but it's also incredibly easy to get lost in. The trails can disappear under the undergrowth. The thick canopy blocks GPS signals, and the constant moisture means your radio doesn't always work reliably. I learned all of this from the manual. What I didn't learn was how that environment could be used against you by someone who understood it better than you did. Elena Vasquez went missing on October 15, 2019. She was a marine biologist from the University of Washington, 28 years old, doing research on the ecosystem relationships between old-growth forest and salmon streams. Smart woman, experienced hiker, and she knew the area reasonably well. She'd been coming out to the peninsula for her research for over 2 years. That should have been my first red flag right there. People who know an area don't just disappear. She'd been staying at a small research station about 15 miles from the main visitor center, deep in the Ho River Valley. When she didn't check in via satellite phone for 2 days running, her department head called us. The last anyone had heard from her, she was planning to collect water samples from some remote tributaries about 5 miles north of the station. I volunteered to take the initial search. Looking back, I know exactly why I did it. I wanted to prove myself. I was still the new guy, still trying to show everyone that I belonged there. My supervisor, Ranger Martinez, suggested we wait until morning and go out as a team, but I convinced him that a single searcher could cover more ground quickly, and if Elena was injured, time was critical. God, I was an idiot. I started out that morning feeling confident. It was October 17th and the weather was typical for the season. Overcast, about 45 degrees, with that constant mist that passes for rain in the Pacific Northwest. I had my full kit: GPS, radio, emergency beacon, first aid supplies, 3 days' worth of food, and my service weapon. The plan was simple: hike to Elena's last known location, establish a search pattern, and radio back every 2 hours with updates. The drive to the trailhead took 45 minutes on increasingly narrow Forest Service roads. By the time I reached the parking area, the forest felt like it was closing in around me. The trees here were massive. Some of the Sitka spruces were over 300 feet tall and had been growing since before Europeans arrived on the continent. Standing at the base of them made you feel insignificant, like a small animal that could be swallowed up and forgotten. The trail started out well maintained, but after about 2 miles it began to deteriorate. This wasn't unusual. A lot of the research sites were accessible only by rough trails that saw very little maintenance. What bothered me was how quiet it was. In 18 months of working in forests, I'd never experienced silence like that. No bird calls, no rustling of small animals in the undergrowth. Even the ever-present sound of dripping water seemed muted. My first radio check-in at 10 a.m. went fine. Clear signal, no problems. I reported my location and estimated I'd reach Elena's research area within 2 hours. Martinez acknowledged and told me to be careful. There had been some reports of unusual wildlife behavior in the area. Bears acting aggressively, deer fleeing for no apparent reason. At the time, I figured it was just seasonal migration patterns. I should have turned around right then. The deeper I went into the forest, the stranger things became. I started noticing broken branches at about shoulder height on the trees. Not the kind of damage you'd see from elk or bears, but clean breaks that looked almost deliberate. Then I found the first trail marker. It was one of our standard markers, a small metal disc nailed to a Douglas fir, but it was facing the wrong direction. Instead of pointing toward the main trail, it was pointing deeper into the forest, toward an area that wasn't on any of my maps. That's when I started to feel like I was being watched. You know that feeling. That prickle on the back of your neck that tells you you're not alone. I'd felt it before when tracking animals, but this was different. This felt intelligent, like something was studying me, learning my patterns, waiting for the right moment. I tried my radio for the noon check-in, but all I got was static. Not unusual given the terrain and weather, but frustrating. The GPS was working fine, showing me exactly where I was, but when I tried to cross-reference with my topographic map, something was wrong. According to the GPS, I was about half a mile south of where the map said I should be. Equipment malfunction, I figured. Electronics don't like the constant moisture of the rainforest. I found Elena's research site at 12:30 p.m. Her equipment was still there. Water sampling gear, a small camp table, notebooks in waterproof cases. Everything was neat and organized, exactly what you'd expect from a scientist. But Elena was nowhere to be found. Her backpack was gone, but her jacket was hanging on a branch nearby. In 45-degree weather with misty rain, no one leaves their jacket behind voluntarily. I called out her name, listening to my voice echo through the trees. No response. I started a grid search pattern around the site looking for footprints, disturbed vegetation, anything that might indicate which direction she'd gone. The forest floor was soft and should have held tracks well, but I couldn't find any clear prints. It was like she'd simply vanished. That's when I found the first piece of evidence that this wasn't a simple missing person case. About 50 yards from the research site, I discovered a deer carcass. It had been gutted and cleaned with surgical precision, hung from a branch about 8 feet off the ground. The kill was fresh, maybe a day old. But here's the thing. It was bow season, and this area was closed to hunting. More importantly, the carcass had been hung using military-style paracord and field dressing techniques that I recognized from my brief time in the National Guard. Someone with advanced hunting skills had been in this area very recently. Someone who didn't care about hunting regulations and had the knowledge to completely field dress a deer in the wilderness. I should have called for backup right then, but my radio was still dead. I tried moving to higher ground to get a signal, but even standing on fallen logs and trying different positions, I couldn't get through. The GPS was now showing me in a completely different location than where I knew I was based on my map and compass. Something was seriously wrong with my equipment. The afternoon light was starting to fade. In the deep forest, it gets dark by 4 p.m. in October. I had maybe 3 hours of usable daylight left, and I still hadn't found any trace of Elena beyond her research site. I made the decision to continue searching rather than head back to get help. It was the kind of decision a rookie makes when he's trying to be the hero, instead of following protocol. I followed what looked like a game trail heading north from Elena's site. The path was barely visible, winding between massive tree trunks and over moss-covered logs. As I walked, I started noticing more signs that someone had been through this area recently. Broken spider webs at head height, disturbed moss, and occasional footprints in muddy patches. But the prints were strange. Sometimes they looked like hiking boots, other times like bare feet, and occasionally like some kind of military tactical boot. At 3 p.m. I tried the radio again. This time I got through, but the transmission was filled with static and what sounded like interference. I could barely make out Martinez's voice asking for my location and status. I tried to respond, but my radio died completely mid-transmission. The battery indicator showed full power, but the unit was completely unresponsive. That's when I heard the first scream. It came from somewhere ahead of me on the trail. Definitely human, definitely female. Elena. I dropped my pack and ran toward the sound, crashing through ferns and jumping over fallen logs. The scream came again, closer this time, filled with terror and pain. I could hear branches breaking and what sounded like someone running through the undergrowth. I found her 20 minutes later in a small clearing about half a mile from the trail. Elena was alive, but barely. She was tied to a large cedar tree with the same type of paracord I'd seen with the deer carcass. Her clothes were torn, and she had cuts and bruises that looked deliberate, not the kind of injuries you get from falling or being lost in the woods. These were the kind of injuries someone inflicts on purpose. She was conscious, but in shock, mumbling incoherently about the hunter and the game. When she saw me, her eyes went wide with terror, and she started shaking her head violently. "He's watching," she whispered. "He's always watching. This is what he wants." I cut her free and tried to calm her down, but she kept looking over my shoulder at the tree line, convinced that someone was out there. I got her to drink some water and tried to assess her injuries. Nothing life-threatening, but she'd been systematically tortured. Shallow cuts, burn marks, psychological trauma designed to break someone down over time. "How long have you been here?" I asked her. 2 days, maybe 3. He comes and goes. Sometimes he pretends to be rescue workers calling my name. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "He knows things about me, about my research, my family. He's been watching me for weeks." That's when I realized we were both in serious trouble. This wasn't some random psychopath who'd stumbled across Elena in the woods. This was someone who had been planning this, someone who had studied her routines and habits, someone who knew these forests better than I did. I tried my emergency beacon, but like everything else, it was malfunctioning. The GPS was now showing us somewhere in Canada, which was obviously impossible. My compass was spinning wildly, unable to find magnetic north. It was like someone was using some kind of electronic interference device to disrupt all my equipment. "We need to get moving," I told Elena. "Can you walk?" She nodded, but when she tried to stand, her legs gave out. Whatever had been done to her over the past few days had left her weak and disoriented. I gave her some energy bars and more water, but I knew she wouldn't be able to move quickly through the forest. As I was helping Elena to her feet, I heard it, the sound that still wakes me up at 3 in the morning. It was a whistle, long and low, coming from somewhere in the forest around us. Not a bird call or any natural sound. This was human, deliberate, and it was answered by another whistle from a different direction. "He's calling them," Elena whispered. "There are more of them." I felt my blood go cold. The idea that there might be multiple people involved in this hadn't occurred to me. I was trained to deal with lost hikers, injured campers, and the occasional drunk who wandered off a trail. I wasn't prepared for an organized group of predators using the national forest as their hunting ground. The whistling came again, closer this time, and I could hear branches snapping as something large moved through the forest toward us. I pulled out my service weapon and tried to remember my tactical training, but my hands were shaking. Elena grabbed my arm. "Don't," she said. "He wants you to shoot. That's part of the game." Before I could ask what she meant, I heard a voice calling from the trees. It was a man's voice, calm and controlled, with just a hint of an accent I couldn't place. "Ranger Cross," the voice called. "Thank you for coming. I was hoping Elena's disappearance would bring someone like you out here." He knew my name. This son of a bitch knew my name. "I'm a federal law enforcement officer," I called back, trying to keep my voice steady. "Come out where I can see you and we can talk about this." Laughter echoed through the trees. "Oh, we're going to talk, Ranger Cross. We're going to have a very long conversation, but first you need to understand the rules of the game." "What game?" I shouted. "Survival," the voice replied. "You have until sunrise to get yourself and Elena out of my forest. If you succeed, you're free to go. If you don't..." The voice trailed off, but the implication was clear. "What happens at sunrise?" I called out, but there was no answer. The forest had gone silent again, that unnatural silence that meant predators were nearby. Elena tugged on my sleeve. "We need to move. Now, when he goes quiet like that, it means he's moving." I helped her to her feet and we started moving as quickly as we could through the undergrowth. My training said to stay on established trails, but Elena insisted we avoid them. "He knows all the trails," she explained as we pushed through a thicket of salmonberry bushes. "He's been living out here for months, maybe years. The trails are where he sets his traps." As if to prove her point, we came across a section of trail that had been rigged with a tripwire connected to what looked like a modified bear trap. The thing would have taken my leg off if I'd stepped on it. Whoever this guy was, he was using military-grade equipment and tactics. We spent the next 2 hours moving through the densest parts of the forest, trying to put distance between ourselves and our hunter. Elena was getting stronger as the adrenaline kicked in, but she was still weak from her ordeal. Every few minutes we'd hear that whistle again, sometimes from behind us, sometimes from ahead. It was like he was herding us in a specific direction. As darkness fell, the temperature dropped into the 30s. The constant mist turned into a light rain, and without proper rain gear, we were both soaked and shivering within an hour. I tried to build a small shelter using my survival training, but Elena stopped me. "No fires, no shelters," she said. "He has night vision equipment. Anything we build just makes us easier to find." So we kept moving through the night, stumbling through the darkness, trying to navigate by the occasional glimpse of stars through the canopy. My flashlight worked intermittently. Sometimes it would shine normally. Other times it would flicker or go out completely. Even the backup lights were unreliable, as if something was draining their batteries. Around midnight, we found a small stream and followed it downhill, hoping it would lead us back toward the main river valley and civilization. The sound of running water masked our footsteps, but it also meant we couldn't hear if anyone was following us. That's when Elena told me the rest of her story. "He's ex-military," she whispered as we picked our way along the stream bank. "Special forces, I think. He told me he'd been hunting people for years, using national parks and wilderness areas as his killing grounds. He picks victims who won't be missed right away. Solo hikers, researchers like me, people who are expected to be out of contact for days at a time. How many? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. He showed me trophies, personal items from at least a dozen people, driver's licenses, jewelry, pieces of clothing, all from people who were reported missing in wilderness areas across the Pacific Northwest over the past 5 years. The implications hit me like a physical blow. We weren't dealing with some random psychopath who'd snapped. This was a serial killer who had turned the forests I'd sworn to protect into his personal hunting preserve. How many missing hiker reports had been filed as people getting lost in the wilderness when they'd actually been murdered? Why did he let you live? I asked. Elena was quiet for a long moment. He said I was bait. He knew about my research, knew that when I didn't check in, the university would call for help. He wanted to see what kind of response he'd get, whether they'd send one ranger or a whole team. And he got me, I said, understanding now why all my equipment had been malfunctioning. This guy had been planning this for weeks, maybe months. He'd studied my routines, my protocols, my weaknesses. I was exactly the kind of target he'd been hoping for, young, inexperienced, eager to prove myself. We followed the stream for another hour before we heard the dogs. They weren't barking or howling like search dogs. These were hunting dogs, and they were on our scent. The sound was coming from behind us, getting closer. Elena and I looked at each other, and I could see the terror in her eyes that matched what I was feeling. "He's ending the game early," she said. We ran. There's no other way to describe it. We crashed through the forest like wild animals, splashing through the stream, tripping over logs, tearing our clothes on branches. Behind us, the sound of the dogs got closer, and now I could hear men's voices shouting commands. My lungs were burning, and Elena was starting to fall behind when we came to a cliff face. The stream had cut a gorge through the rock, and there was nowhere to go but down. The drop was maybe 30 feet into a pool of black water. In daylight, with proper equipment, it might have been manageable. In the dark, with no idea how deep the water was or what was at the bottom, it was potentially suicide. But the sound of the dogs was getting closer. "Can you swim?" I asked Elena. She nodded, and without another word, we jumped. The water was so cold it drove all the air from my lungs. I went under and kept going down deeper than I'd expected, until my boots hit the rocky bottom of the pool. I pushed off and swam up, breaking the surface just as Elena came up beside me, gasping and choking. Above us, we could hear the dogs at the edge of the cliff, whining and pacing. Men's voices were arguing about something, but I couldn't make out the words. We treaded water in the darkness, trying not to make any noise, hoping they'd assume we'd drowned or been swept downstream. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, the voices moved away. We swam to the far side of the pool and pulled ourselves out onto a rocky ledge, both of us shaking uncontrollably from the cold. The rest of the night was a blur of stumbling through the darkness, following the stream as it wound its way through the forest. My watch had stopped working, so I had no idea what time it was, but I could feel sunrise approaching in that way you can when you've been awake all night in mortal terror. Elena was failing. The jump into the pool had taken the last of her strength, and hypothermia was setting in. I was carrying her more than she was walking, and I knew we weren't going to make it much farther. If our hunter was still following us, it was only a matter of time before he caught up. That's when we saw the lights. At first, I thought it was another trick, another part of the game our hunter was playing. But as we got closer, I could see it was a Forest Service vehicle parked at a trail junction. Martinez and 2 other rangers were setting up search equipment, getting ready to come looking for me. I've never been so happy to see another human being in my life. "Martinez!" I shouted, stumbling out of the tree line with Elena leaning heavily against me. "Martinez, we need help." The look on his face when he saw us told me everything I needed to know about how we looked. We were both soaked, hypothermic, covered in cuts and bruises, and probably looked like we'd been through hell. Which I suppose we had. They got us into the warm vehicle and called for medical evacuation while I tried to explain what had happened. But even as I was telling the story, I knew how it sounded. A serial killer using the national forest as a hunting ground? Military-grade equipment disrupting our communications? Dogs and multiple attackers? It sounded like the ravings of someone who'd gotten lost in the woods and let their imagination run wild. Martinez believed me, though. He'd been working these forests for 20 years, and he'd seen enough unexplained disappearances to know that not everyone who went missing had simply fallen off a cliff or gotten lost. We called in the FBI, and they spent 3 weeks searching the area where Elena and I had been held. They found evidence, lots of it, campsites that had been used for extended periods, military equipment caches, personal items from missing hikers going back years, and bodies. They found the remains of 7 people who had been reported missing from various national parks and forests across Washington, Oregon, and Northern California. But they never found him. The man who called himself a hunter, who had turned the wilderness into his personal killing ground, had vanished without a trace. The FBI profiler said he'd probably moved on to a different hunting ground, maybe in Alaska or Canada, where there's even more remote wilderness to hide in. Elena recovered physically, but she never went back to field research. Last I heard, she was teaching at a community college in Seattle, staying as far away from the wilderness as possible. We keep in touch sometimes, usually around the anniversary of that night. Neither of us talks about it much, but we both understand what the other went through in a way that no one else can. As for me, I lasted another 6 months as a forest ranger before I couldn't take it anymore. Every time I went out on patrol, I felt like I was being watched. Every broken branch, every unusual sound, every equipment malfunction sent me into a panic. I'd find myself checking over my shoulder constantly, jumping at shadows, unable to shake the feeling that he was still out there, still playing his game. The final straw came during a routine search and rescue call. A day hiker had gotten turned around on a popular trail, nothing serious. But when my radio started acting up and my GPS showed me in the wrong location, I had a complete breakdown. I was found 6 hours later by the search team, sitting on a log, staring into the forest, unable to explain why I hadn't completed my assigned search pattern. I resigned the next week. My wife thinks I should let it go, that I should stop waking up at 3 a.m. listening for whistles in the desert wind. She says the dreams will fade with time, that moving to Arizona was enough, that I'm safe now, and maybe she's right. Maybe the man who hunted Elena and me is dead or in prison or has moved on to some other wilderness area far from here. But sometimes when I'm checking the locks on our doors for the 3rd time before bed, or when I catch myself scanning the tree line at a rest stop during a family road trip, I remember something Elena told me during those terrible hours we spent running through the Olympic forest. He said he had hunters like him all over the country, she whispered as we huddled together in the darkness. He said it was like a network, sharing information, trading hunting grounds. He said the wilderness was full of predators and most people never realized they were being hunted until it was too late. The FBI dismissed that as the ramblings of a torture victim, the kind of psychological manipulation serial killers use to increase their victims' terror. But sometimes when I see a news report about hikers who vanished without a trace, or when I hear about search and rescue operations where the missing person is never found, I wonder. The wilderness is vast and there are places where a person can disappear completely, where no one would ever think to look for them. And if Elena was right, if there really are people out there who have turned our national forests into hunting grounds, then every solo hiker, every researcher, every ranger who goes into the backcountry alone is potentially walking into a trap. I tell myself that's paranoid thinking, that I'm letting one horrible experience color my perception of the entire wilderness system. But then I remember the sound of that whistle in the Olympic forest, the calm voice calling my name from the darkness, the feeling of being studied and evaluated like prey. And I know that somewhere out there in forests and parks across the country, the game is still being played. The hunters are still hunting, and the wilderness that we think of as a refuge from the dangers of civilization might actually be where the most dangerous predators of all have learned to hide. That's why I'm telling this story now. Not because I think it will help me sleep better. I know those 3 a.m. wake-ups are probably permanent. But because I want people to know that when you go into the wilderness, you need to be aware that you might not be alone. That the feeling of being watched might not be paranoia. That the most dangerous animal in any forest walks on 2 legs and thinks like you do. If you're planning a solo trip into the backcountry, Tell someone exactly where you're going and when you'll be back. Carry redundant communication devices. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, get out. And if your equipment starts malfunctioning all at once, if you hear whistles that don't sound like birds, if you find evidence of human activity in places where there shouldn't be any, don't try to be a hero. Run. Elena and I were lucky. We got out alive, and the evidence we provided helped the FBI close 7 missing person cases and probably prevented future murders. But I know we were lucky, and I know that others haven't been. The hunter who stalked us through the Olympic forest is still out there somewhere, and he's not alone. The wilderness might look empty, but it's not. And sometimes the thing that's watching you from the shadows isn't a bear or a cougar. Sometimes it's something much worse. Sometimes it's human.